I used to think love could survive anything, even bad timekeeping. I told myself that when people are busy, the clock is a poor witness. But anniversaries aren't about the clock. They are about attention. They are a way of saying, I saw that day, and I see you still. 2 weeks before our third anniversary, I booked a table. Not a flashy place, just a restaurant where we once stayed, so long the staff started stacking chairs, and we didn't notice. I picked a corner booth. I called his favorite taxi company in case he ran late from work. I even arranged for them to hold the small lemon cake we loved the summer we first met. The manager said, "We'll put a candle in it. It will look like a promise." That morning he kissed my hair and said, "Tonight's going to be great." He sent me a text at noon, a blurry photo of a dog in a sweater a colleague brought into the office. I replied with a heart and the reservation time. "I'll be there," he wrote back, and for an hour the future felt neat and folded. In the late afternoon, clouds drew a gray shawl over the city. The air smelled like wet paper. I got to the restaurant 15 minutes early because I wanted to see him arrive. Coat unbuttoned, that crooked half-smile, the way he would slide into the booth and say, "I can't believe it's been 3 years." I told the hostess his name, just in case he came before me. She smiled like a person who believes in best-case scenarios for strangers. The first 20 minutes were fine. I sipped water, watched the door, reminded my heart not to leap every time a dark coat walked in. When the minute hand ticked past the reservation, I texted, "Traffic okay?" No read receipt, which sometimes happened when he was underground on the train. I asked for bread. The waiter set down a basket and a small plate of olives, eyes kind. The way people are with someone who looks like they are waiting for weather to change. By 40 minutes, I had already constructed 3 excuses for him. A meeting ran over. The boss asked for last-minute numbers. A train got stuck between stations, and everyone stood breathing recycled air and staring at advertisements for vacation cities they couldn't afford. The excuses were a necklace I kept adding beads to, hoping the weight would keep my irritation from floating up. At an hour, I felt the room notice me. Not cruelly, just that subtle shift when a table stops being a table and becomes a story. The waiter said we could hold the booth as long as I needed. I said thank you and meant it. I called his phone, and it went to voicemail on the second ring, the way a door swings closed when someone pushes it gently from the other side. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light in case it was played on speaker near strangers. "Just checking on you. I'm here. No rush, just text me. Love you." The candlelight made the lemon cake, and its box looked like a tiny moon behind cardboard clouds. The hostess refilled my water like it was the most important thing she could do. A couple 2 tables over clinked glasses in a miniature ceremony, and I let myself believe their toast was about us. To faithful calendars, to trains arriving, to people keeping their word. At 90 minutes, I stopped pretending to be fine. I asked for the cake. I lit the candle myself. I looked at the small flame wobble in the restaurant's breath, and I whispered, "I do not want to be this person. The person who rationed grace until they were left thirsty. The person who knew the shape of disappointment by touch." He texted at 9:07 p.m. and same day. "Coming soon." A minute later, "Don't be mad. I'm almost there." I read those sentences like they were written on the inside of my chest. I typed back, "Okay, I'm at the booth." I added a small sparkle emoji because I was still the version of me who decorated his sentences with hope. By 9:40, the candle had eaten itself into a puddle of wax, and I felt it as a metaphor even though I was tired of metaphors. The waiter brought the check quietly, without asking if we were ready, because I suppose I looked like a person who didn't need more questions. I paid and left a tip that was too much, because I wanted someone that evening to feel like they got more than they expected. Outside, the rain had started in earnest. The city shivered in reflections. I walked slowly, as if going home too quickly might make the emptiness louder when I opened the door. He called at 10:11 p.m. I didn't answer, not out of revenge, but because the sound of his name vibrating in my hand felt like bad special effects. He sent a text, "Please pick up." Another, "I'm 2 stops away." Another, 10 minutes later, "Are you home?" I opened the door to our apartment at 10:37, and the quiet inside startled me. Houses keep their own book of expectations. The clatter of keys, the hello shouted from the hall, the sigh of shoes kicked under the bench. I set the unopened cake on the counter and stood in the dark kitchen until the refrigerator's motor turned on, grateful for company. My phone buzzed again. I messed up. I know. Talk to me. I typed, "Come home," and sent it before I could decide not to. He arrived damp and breathless, hair pushed back, eyes performing panic. "I screwed up," he said, like it was a line he'd practiced on the train. "My boss, the numbers, I tried to leave." The excuses spilled out, clattering across the floor like dropped cutlery. I nodded, not because I believed him, but because I was too tired to argue with the objects making the noise. "Do you remember our first anniversary?" I asked, soft as a museum docent. He grabbed a towel and said, "Of course. The rooftop. The one with the broken elevator," I said. "You carried the wine up 8 flights. You said the view was worth it. You said I was worth it." He smiled like he wanted to be returned to that version of himself. "I still think you're worth it," he said. The sentence arrived without a bridge to this evening. I cut the cake. The lemon smelled like a summer that could cover anything. He said, "Can I try again?" "Tomorrow." And I said, "We do not get to move anniversaries like furniture." The words surprised me with their clarity, like discovering a window you thought was painted shut can open with 2 fingers. He asked if I was breaking up with him. I said no, because endings deserve fewer metaphors than that. "I am learning a lesson," I said. "I am learning that wanting and showing are different verbs." "Please," he said, "don't make this big." "It was big," I said, and I felt the truth settle like a coat on my shoulders. Not heavy, but definite. It still is. We ate the cake in slices that tasted like ceremony and apology, and a dozen small futures, clearing their throats. I didn't cry. I wish I could say that not crying meant strength. It meant the opposite. The tears had already happened somewhere earlier. Tonight there was only dryness and the simple arithmetic of what had and had not occurred. When he fell asleep that night, on his side of the bed, breath even, phone face up for once, I lay awake and replayed the evening like a bad song stuck on repeat. I asked myself questions with answers that weren't complicated at all. When someone shows you where you fit on their calendar, do you correct the calendar or your position on it? If a person only arrives after the candle gutters, do you become a magician who can make wax appear again? The truth was plain, and I wished it were not. Something had ended tonight. Not the relationship, not yet, but the story I told myself about it had finished a paragraph, put down the period, and turned the page. The morning tried to behave as if the night hadn't happened. The kettle sang. The toaster offered its dry miracles. A slant of winter light made the countertop look like it had been polished by a forgiving God. He came into the kitchen in the t-shirt I'd bought him on a trip we'd taken back, when time felt like there would always be enough of it. He reached for my shoulder and stopped halfway, as if remembering the choreography had changed. "I'm sorry," he said. He was always good at that word, which is part of what made it useless. A tool is only as good as the thing it builds. "I don't want a script," I said. And even as I said it, I heard how stern I sounded. "I want a plan that doesn't require me to explain why I am not a piece of furniture you can move when meetings run late." He nodded. "I know." He looked at the lemon cake, 2 slices gone, and managed a smile that I almost forgave with my body. "It's still good," he said. I wanted to tell him I wasn't angry about the cake or even the dinner. I was angry about becoming a person who set aside a booth inside her heart and waited while someone else decided whether to sit down. Instead, I poured coffee. He took his mug like a person being handed a life raft that required a password. "What do you need?" he asked. The question had once charmed me. He used to ask it when we were new, and he meant it like a flashlight into a cave. "Let me see your insides so I can learn how to be kind inside them." But lately it had become a way to shift labor back to me. "What do you need?" "Translate yourself. Draft a plan. Print a list. When I'm late to love, remind me of the address. I need you to show up," I said, without me telling you how. That day at work, I did not get much work done. I clicked through spreadsheets and answered emails in polite, unchanged sentences, and underneath everything my brain was running a quiet inventory. This was not the first event he had missed. There had been a cousin's graduation. No one will notice I'm not there. A friend's low-key engagement drinks. I'll come after this set of slides, and then the slides multiplied. A dentist appointment he swore he'd accompany me to because I'm still 8 years old at the sound of drills. A Sunday matinee he bought tickets for and then forgot. It is astonishing how long you can maintain the idea that a thing is an exception when the evidence keeps arriving like regular mail. Tom messaged at lunch to ask how the anniversary went. I wrote, "Rained out." He replied with a row of storm cloud emojis and one sun, because he's the kind of friend who believes in eventual weather. At 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with a calendar invitation. "Dinner, tonight, 7:30. Your place or mine?" The title made me laugh in a way that wasn't laughter. I declined the invitation and texted him, "Let's not reschedule an anniversary." He responded with a sad face and, "I hear you," which is a sentence people say when they want credit for not being deaf. We met in the evening anyway because the alternative was staying tangled in separate rooms with separate screens. He brought flowers, and I told myself gifts are not a confession, but also not a lie. He suggested we cook together. The kitchen filled with steam and garlic, and that specific warmth the stove gives that is different from any other heat in a house. For 30 minutes, we acted like two people who knew how to share a space. For 10 minutes after that, we acted like two people who might know how to share a life. Then his phone lit up. He didn't pick it up, but his eyes went there the way flowers go toward windows. The message preview glowed with a name I didn't recognize and a sentence that began, "Any chance the deck is?" He flipped the phone over and smiled at me like a magician who wants the audience to believe nothing happened behind the silk. "Do you want to get that?" I asked. "It can wait," he said, and I believed him. I also believed the gravity of the phone. His body had learned a reflex he didn't even name. The object vibrated again, small and insistent, a second heartbeat. He kept talking about the pasta water and whether we had enough salt, and I kept nodding like a person at a lecture who is hoping the professor stops asking questions. After we ate, we sat on the couch, and he turned to me with his game face, as if we were about to negotiate a project plan. "Here's what I think," he said. "I think I need to put better boundaries around work. I can talk to my manager. I can set my phone to do not disturb. I can block out nights on my calendar and fiercely defend them." "That's good," I said and meant it. "But I don't want to be a block on your calendar. I want to be a person you look for and remember without an appointment." He winced because he knew the difference and also because he liked the calendar. It made love into rectangles he could move around with his finger. "Give me a month," he said. "I'll prove it." A month is both a small bite of a year and a very long time to hold your breath. The first week, he did me better. He came home when he said he would. He left his phone in his bag, like a guilty pet. He asked about my day in a way that suggested he might remember the answer tomorrow. We watched a show without pausing every 12 minutes for him to check who else wanted him. I slept in the heavy way wooden things must sleep. The second week, a project slid sideways and his hours stretched. He promised it was temporary. He promised it like people promise the weather will break after this last storm. We moved dinner by 30 minutes, then an hour, then to tomorrow. I found myself saving bites of good news the way you save the best piece of fruit on your plate. Something to share later if later showed up. It didn't always. By the third week, the month looked silly in my hands. I was entertaining myself with a deadline no one had agreed to meet. He wasn't cruel. He made me tea in the mornings. He bought a funny towel that said kitchen, which, because I like Halloween and impractical months. He sent me photos of cats he passed in windows. But the part of love that makes time wasn't working. Love can conquer a lot. It cannot manufacture hours if a person has already leased them to someone else. Friday of that week, I found a reservation card I had tucked into a cookbook. The restaurant's name stared up at me like a friend you avoid because you owe them an apology. I held the paper and felt the dull ache of a promise that had been canceled without a new date. Not everything in life demands an anniversary, but some things require being counted. I put on my coat and walked to the restaurant. I didn't go inside. I stood across the street, and looked at the window that had held our reflection 3 years ago when we took a bad selfie, and loved it because our faces were arranged in the unpracticed way of people surprised by their own happiness. Inside, a couple sat in our booth, the woman talking with her hands and the man listening with his jaw soft. It felt like watching a version of my life that learned its lines. He called as I stood there. "Where are you?" he asked. I said, "Taking attendance." He said, "Let me join you." I said, "Not this time." And the words were not an attack. They were a boundary, like a fence that tells a dog which field is his. On Sunday, I suggested we write each other letters. He raised an eyebrow in the way he does when he wants to be kind to an idea he thinks is ornamental. "It helps," I said. "Sometimes the page can say what mouths can't." He agreed because he always agrees with the preface of change. I wrote first. I told him about the booth and the candle and the lemon that tried to cover the taste of absence. I told him about the dignity of being waited for. I told him about my fear of becoming a clerk who files excuses in labeled drawers. I said, "Love is not a miracle, but it is a discipline." And as I wrote it, I knew the sentence was for both of us. He wrote next. He said he felt like he was sprinting all the time, and that if he stopped, the treadmill would spit him into a wall. He said he hated that he needed the world to call him important, and that he wished the world would do it without him having to check if it had. He said he was scared I would leave him, and even more scared that I should. We sat at the table with our letters between us like offerings to a weather god. "What now?" he asked. I said, "Now we change something practical. Love does not respond to poems the way roofs do not respond to compliments. You must fix the leak. We tried a rule, one sacred evening a week, non-negotiable. We named it Tuesday, because Tuesday is too plain to be claimed by anyone else. The first Tuesday, he was present like a person at an altar. The second Tuesday, a client dinner appeared and he said, "I can't move it. It's political." And I watched Tuesday turn into a word that did not mean us at all. He promised to make it up on Wednesday. Wednesday arrived with the soft apology of a person who has already promised Thursday to something else. We tried therapy. The therapist was calm in a way that made me want to tell her secrets, just to wrinkle her. She asked him, "What is the story you tell yourself about being late?" He said, "That means I'm needed." She asked me, "What is the story you tell yourself about being chosen?" I said, "That it should be obvious." The therapist smiled like a person who has found a tidy knot in a forest of string. "Obvious to whom?" she asked. "To both of us," I said, and I heard the childishness in the answer. Children are the ones who believe the world owes them obviousness. We tried calendars, then we tried erasing calendars. We tried making breakfast the new evening. We tried turning off our phones at 9 p.m. We tried a jar where we would put small slips of paper each time one of us felt seen. The jar filled, and yet my chest did not. One night, he told me about a colleague who had started training for a marathon and kept posting sunrise photos. He said, "I don't get people who choose pain for fun." I said, "Maybe it isn't pain, maybe it's proof." He said, "Proof of what?" I said, "That they can make time do something for them." He laughed and called it poetic. I heard the laughter like a door closing quietly. I didn't want to become a person who counted the seconds someone was late, but the seconds kept making themselves heard. One evening, he arrived with flowers again, white tulips, clean and embarrassed. He held them out like a visa application. I took them and said thank you and placed them in a jar. And as I did, I realized I had run out of vases because flowers had been doing the work dinners should have done. When I was small, my mother taught me to set the table even when we were alone. "We teach the house how to treat us," she said. I found myself setting 2 places and then eating at one. The fork at the empty seat looked like a promise written in stainless steel. The chair looked patient in a way that made me irrationally angry. No object should be more patient than a person. I started walking after dark, because the city has a way at night of shrinking to the size of your thoughts. I walked past windows where blue TV light painted people into small myths, and I told myself I was not looking in. I was looking through. I walked across the bridge where the river wears the sky like a borrowed coat, and thought about the first year he and I spent together, How time then was a bowl we kept filling with little things, and the little things made a banquet. It is terrible how quickly a bowl can become a sieve. On a Thursday, he texted, "Running late. 20 minutes." I replied, "Okay." 20 minutes became 50. He walked in with a grin and a story about a client who had mispronounced a word so badly the whole office wheezed. He told it like a gift. He kissed my forehead and washed his hands and set the table and asked me to sit and eat, and for a few minutes I did, because hunger is not a metaphor. It is a stomach. Then he said, "So Saturday, there's this thing." And I felt my body turn into an empty seat. "What thing?" I asked, and he started explaining an event at a colleague's house, and who would be there, and why it mattered, and I saw our anniversary sitting across the table, shaking her head. It sounds dramatic to say I heard something break, but I did. It wasn't a plate or a frame. It was the rope that had been dragging us forward. It slipped through my hands in a long, painful hiss, and then there was nothing left to hold. "I can't do this," I said. My voice was a steady instrument in a room that had never heard it played. "I can't keep putting on nice clothes for dates that exist in drafts." He said, "You're overreacting." People love that word when the reaction is to their inaction. "Maybe," I said, "but my feelings have been patient for a very long time. They have waited on benches. They have checked their watches. They have gone to the counter to ask if a miracle had been delayed." He reached for my hand, and I did not give it. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I had finally realized my hand is a resource, and I was mismanaging it. "I need you to hear me," I said. "Not to fix me. Not to ask me what I need. To hear that what I needed was you. Here, and you did not come." People ask, as if there is one, the moment you know. They want fireworks, a siren, the dramatic image of a person standing in the rain with a suitcase. The truth is, it's quieter. It's a Thursday in an ordinary kitchen where you recognize the sound of your own certainty. He began to bargain. "Let me show you I can change," he said. "Let me prove it." "To whom?" I asked. He blinked. "To you. You don't have to prove it to me," I said. "You have to prove it to time. And time already knows your habits." We slept in the same bed that night, like people on opposite ends of a long bench, both pretending to look at the same painting. In the morning, I packed a small bag, 2 sweaters, a book with a generous spine, the plant that wilts if you don't talk to it. He watched me and said, "Is this it?" I said, "This is me refusing to be rescheduled." It is funny, in a sad way, how language from your fights becomes the language of your leaving. I stayed with a friend. Her apartment had the kind of quiet that respects you. She made soup and told me boring stories about her office, and I listened like they were medicine. Boredom is underrated in an emergency. It means the ground is solid. I slept through the night and woke up with a new kind of ache. Not the sharp pain of recent injury, but the soreness of muscles after you stop clenching. He texted in paragraphs, then in poems, then in emojis, when the words seemed too heavy to lift. He asked me what I needed. I didn't answer because the question had become a spell to keep the work in my hands. He sent a photo of the rooftop from our first anniversary, as if the building could vouch for him. I put the phone face down like a book I wasn't ready to keep reading. Days gathered. I went to therapy alone. I said sentences that felt like learning to walk again. I am allowed to want to be chosen. I do not need to be convinced that I matter. I can want a Tuesday that doesn't require an NDA. The therapist nodded and asked where in my body those sentences felt true. "In my shoulders," I said, surprised. Like someone set down a box I'd been carrying because I forgot I could ask for help. I did not become a saint. I stalked his social media twice and hated myself, once for counting minutes between his posts and comments, like a teenager monitoring a crush. Grief is a messy roommate. It leaves dishes in the sink and plays songs too loudly, and then refuses to tell you why you're crying in front of a commercial for cereal. He asked to meet on the bridge. "It's our place," he wrote. It was, and it wasn't. Places don't hold you. You hold them. I said yes, because I wanted to see the version of him who might have arrived if he had arrived. We stood where the wind braids your hair into arguments. He looked thinner, which is not a compliment. He started to speak, and I raised a hand, not to silence him, but to make space around the words. I believe you want to be different, I said. I also believe you are who you practice. And lately you have practiced not coming, and I have practiced waiting, and I do not want either of us to get better at those. He nodded and cried, and I believed his tears. Sincerity is not a cure, but it deserves to be recognized. Can we start over? He asked. We would still be us, I said. We would only be starting later. He laughed once, a sad little sound at the honesty of that. We hugged in the unromantic way people hug when they're placing something down together. After life did the thing it does, it kept going without asking my permission. I went back to my friend's apartment, then to a place of my own. Uneven floors, a window that makes 6 p.m. look like forgiveness, a kitchen where the kettle sings to a timetable no one can interrupt. I set the table for one and did not feel lonely. I felt accurate. Some evenings I walk by the restaurant. Sometimes our booth is empty. Sometimes two people who have no idea I exist are inventing a version of love I want to believe in. I silently wish them trains that run on time, meetings that end, a world that doesn't require them to act surprised that they chose each other. I wish them Tuesdays. Friends ask if I'd take him back if he proved it. I tell them what I know now. Proof is not a bouquet you hand over after arriving late. Proof is the act of arriving. It's a chair pulled out, a door held open, a phone face down because the face you want is already in the room. It's the sentence, I'm here, measured against the evidence of 1,000 small hours. On the anniversary of the anniversary, I made the lemon cake. I lit a candle. I did not make a wish because I don't want love to be magic. I want it to be practice. I cut a slice and carried it to the window and watched the city arrange its own tiny ceremonies. Headlights threading the street, a cyclist balancing a bag of baked bread, a child convincing a reluctant dog to turn left. The world was showing up for itself. He didn't show up on our anniversary. People will say things happen. Trains stall. Bosses insist. Clients panic. All of that is true. But every story has a moral, and mine is ordinary and therefore hard to learn. Someone will always be asking for your time. Love is who you hand the calendar to. I finally handed mine back to myself. When I blew out the candle, the room did not go dark. It never had. The light was simply coming from somewhere that did not need to be confirmed. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.